listening house. The house watched her pull into the driveway. Nora told herself that wasn't true. Houses don't watch. But as she stepped out of her car and looked up at the sagging porch, the two windows on the second floor, the way the late afternoon light caught the glass just so, she couldn't shake the feeling that something behind those windows had turned its attention toward her. She hadn't been here in 19 years. Not since she was 8, when her mother had packed their bags in the middle of the night and driven them 600 miles without stopping. Nora remembered sleeping in the back seat, waking to find them in a motel parking lot, her mother gripping the steering wheel even though the engine was off. "We're not going back," her mother had said. "We're never going back." She'd kept that promise. Even when Grandma Lily sent letters. Even when she called. Even at the end, when the hospice nurse had reached out to say it would be soon, her mother had refused to go. And now her mother was gone too, loss in March, breast cancer, brutally fast, and Nora was $30,000 in debt and 3 months behind on rent, and here was this house. Hers now. The lawyer's letter had been very clear about that. The only living heir. She could sell it. That was the plan. Sell it, pay off the worst of the debt, find somewhere cheap to start over. But first she had to clean it out, and she couldn't afford to hire anyone, so here she was. Alone. The porch steps groaned under her weight. The front door was unlocked. The lawyer had mentioned that Grandma Lily hadn't locked it in years. Nothing to steal, he'd said. Nothing anyone would want. Inside, the air was stale and cold. Not the cold of winter, though November had turned bitter. A different kind of cold. The kind that made Nora think of root cellars. Of things kept underground. The hallway stretched ahead of her, dim despite the daylight outside. Wallpaper peeled in long strips, revealing older wallpaper beneath, and beneath that, bare plaster the color of bone. Dust covered everything, the floor, the baseboards, the small table by the door where a rotary phone sat with its cord cut. Nora set down her bag. The sound was too loud in the silence. "Hello?" she called, and immediately felt foolish. No one answered. Of course no one answered. Grandma Lily had died alone in this house 6 weeks ago, found by the mailman when the letters started piling up. Heart failure, the coroner said. Natural causes. Nora walked deeper inside. The living room was small, cramped with furniture that had been old when her grandmother was young. A couch with wooden arms. A chair by the window. A television from the 80s, its screen thick with dust. On the mantel above the fireplace, photographs in tarnished frames, people Nora didn't recognize, stiff and formal, their eyes following her as she moved. She found the kitchen next. Dishes in the sink, crusted and waiting. A calendar on the wall still turned to September, a date circled in red ink. The day her grandmother died, Nora realized. She had circled the day of her own death. No. That didn't make sense. Probably a doctor's appointment. Something ordinary. But she didn't go closer to check. The stairs to the second floor were narrow, the banister loose under her hand. Nora climbed slowly, listening to the house settle around her. Old houses made noises. She knew that. Wood expanding and contracting. Pipes cooling. Nothing strange about it. At the top of the stairs, a hallway with 3 doors. 2 were open, a bathroom with a clawfoot tub, a bedroom with a bare mattress. The 3rd was closed. Nora reached for the handle. The metal was warm. Not just warm, hot, as if someone had been gripping it moments before. She pulled her hand back, flexing her fingers. Old houses, she told herself. Sun through a window. Something ordinary. She opened the door. Her grandmother's bedroom. A large bed with a quilted cover, neatly made. A dresser with a mirror gone cloudy with age. A closet door ajar, full of clothes that smelled of lavender and something else, something sharper. And on every surface, the nightstand, the dresser, the windowsill, even stacked on the floor in crooked towers, notebooks. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. Nora stepped inside and picked one up. The cover was plain, a cheap composition book, the kind she'd used in school. Inside, her grandmother's handwriting, she recognized it from the letters her mother had thrown away unopened, cramped and slanting, filling every line. November 3rd, 1987. The Miller boy rode his bicycle past the house at 4:15 p.m. He was wearing a red jacket. He looked at the upstairs window for 6 seconds before writing on. Nora turned the page. November 3rd, 1987. 6:30 p.m. A car I did not recognize drove slowly down the road. Blue sedan, older model. Could not see the driver. It did not stop. She flipped ahead. November 4th, 1987. The mailman was 12 minutes late. He seemed nervous. He did not wave. Page after page. Date after date. Observations. Notes. The comings and goings of neighbors, of strangers, of delivery drivers and passing cars. Every detail recorded. Every movement watched. Nora put the notebook down. Her hands were shaking. She looked at the towers of notebooks surrounding her. At the closet, where she could now see boxes stacked in the darkness, more notebooks crammed inside. At the walls, where the wallpaper bulged in places, as if something had been stuffed behind it. 19 years of silence, and this was what her grandmother had been doing. Watching. Writing it all down. Nora backed out of the room and closed the door. She stood in the hallway, breathing hard, telling herself this was fine, this was just a lonely old woman with nothing better to do, this was. From somewhere deep in the house, she heard a sound. Soft. Rhythmic. Like someone turning pages. She didn't sleep that night. Nora told herself it was the unfamiliar bed, the bare mattress in the second bedroom where she'd laid out her sleeping bag. The sounds of the house settling. The wind outside, rattling the windows in their frames. But really it was the notebooks. She couldn't stop thinking about them. Couldn't stop seeing her grandmother hunched over a desk, pen moving, writing down every passing car, every dog walker, every shift in the world outside. Why? By morning, she had convinced herself it wasn't so strange. Loneliness did things to people. Her grandmother had lived out here alone for decades, no neighbors close by, no family after Nora's mother had taken them away. Of course she'd become eccentric. Of course she'd developed habits, rituals, ways to fill the empty hours. It didn't mean anything. Nora made instant coffee on the old gas stove and drank it standing at the kitchen window, watching the gray morning light spread across the overgrown yard. A rusted swing set stood at the edge of the property, half swallowed by weeds. She didn't remember it. Didn't remember playing on it. But she must have, once. She'd been here until she was 8. Strange how little she remembered. After the coffee, she went back upstairs. The bedroom door was still closed. She'd left it that way. But standing in front of it now, she noticed something she'd missed the night before, scratches in the wood around the handle. Long, vertical scratches, as if someone had dragged their fingernails down the door. From the inside. Old house, Nora told herself. Could be anything. She opened the door. The notebooks were where she'd left them. The room smelled the same, lavender and that other smell, the one she couldn't name. Sharp, almost chemical. Like developing fluid, she thought. Like photographs left too long in the bath. She picked up another notebook. This one was dated 1994. March 12, 1994. The Hendricks woman walked past at 7:40 a.m. She was alone. She has been alone for 3 weeks now. I do not think her husband is coming back. March 12, 1994. 2:15 p.m. A truck from the electric company parked at the end of the road. 2 men sat inside for 40 minutes. They did not get out. They were watching the Peterson house. Or they were watching mine. March 12, 1994. 9 p.m. Someone stood at the edge of the property for 6 minutes. I could not see their face. When I turned on the porch light, they were gone. Nora set that notebook aside and picked up another. 2001. June 5th, 2001. The new family has a daughter. 8 years old, blonde hair, rides a blue bicycle. She waved at my window today. I did not wave back. It is better if they do not notice me noticing. That phrase snagged in her mind. It is better if they do not notice me noticing. Why would that matter? Why would a lonely old woman care if the neighbors knew she watched? Unless she wasn't just watching for herself. Nora opened the closet. Boxes, as she'd seen before, but more than she'd realized. Stacked floor to ceiling, crammed into every inch of space. She pulled one out and opened it. Notebooks. She opened another. More notebooks. A third box held something different, letters, bundled with rubber bands, all of them addressed to her grandmother, all of them unopened. She recognized her mother's handwriting on one of the envelopes. Nora's chest tightened. She set the letters aside. That was a wound she wasn't ready to open. Not yet. She kept digging. At the back of the closet, behind the boxes, she found a section of wall where the plaster had been cut away. A hole, maybe 2 feet square, revealing the dark space between the walls. And stuffed into that space, crammed so tightly they compressed into a solid mass, more notes. Not notebooks this time, but loose pages, receipts, napkins, anything her grandmother could write on. Nora pulled one out. The paper was brittle, yellowed with age. August 8, 1962. A man came to the door today. He said he was selling insurance. He had blue eyes and a scar on his left hand. He stood on the porch for 4 minutes after I closed the door. I could hear him breathing. Her grandmother had been doing this for over 60 years. Nora pulled out another page. This one was written on the back of a grocery receipt. The thing in the walls is hungry. I can feel it pressing. I must write more. I must watch more. It keeps us safe, but only if I feed it. Only if I keep feeding it. Nora read that line again. The thing in the walls. She put the page down. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. They'd gone very still, the way they did when she was in shock, when the world had shifted and her body hadn't caught up yet. She looked at the hole in the wall. At the darkness beyond. Something in that darkness shifted. Not a sound. Not a movement she could see. Just a sense, sudden and absolute, that she was being observed. That something in the walls of this house had turned its attention toward her, the way she might turn toward a sound in another room. Nora stood up fast, knocking over a stack of notebooks. They fell with a sound like a body hitting the floor, and she was out of the room, down the stairs, through the front door, standing on the porch in the gray morning light with her heart slamming against her ribs. The rusted swing set creaked in the wind. Nothing followed her out. She stood there for a long time, breathing, telling herself she'd imagined it. A draft. A mouse in the walls. The power of suggestion after reading an old woman's paranoid ramblings. But she didn't go back inside. Not for an hour. And when she finally did, she didn't go back upstairs. Instead, she went to the kitchen and found the letters she'd seen bundled in the box. She brought them to the table and began to read. Her mother's first letter was dated 1989, 2 years after they'd left. "Mom, I don't know if you'll read this. I don't know if you can anymore. But I need you to know why I took Nora away. I need you to understand." She was starting to watch. She was starting to write things down. I found a notebook under her pillow. She was 8 years old, and she'd written 6 pages about the neighbor's cat. Where it went. When it came back. How long it sat on the fence. "I know you think you're protecting us. I know you believe the deal is real. But I won't let her become what you've become. I won't let her spend her life feeding that thing. Please don't write to her. Please don't call. Let her forget. Sarah." Nora set the letter down. The kitchen was very quiet. She tried to remember. 8 years old. A notebook. Watching the neighbor's cat. Nothing. Just a blank space where the memory should be. But her hands remembered something. The feel of a pen. The compulsion to write it all down. From upstairs, she heard a sound. Soft. Rhythmic. Like someone turning pages. She read all of her mother's letters. There were 14 of them, spanning 2 decades. The early ones were angry, pleading, trying to explain. The later ones were shorter, more distant, the way you write to someone who has already become a stranger. The last one was dated 2015, 8 years before her mother died. "Mom, Nora asked about you today. I told her you were gone. I know that's not true, but it's easier than explaining. Easier than telling her what you did to her. What you almost made her into. She doesn't remember any of it. The doctor said that's normal, that children can suppress things, that it's a kind of protection. I hope they're right. I hope she never remembers. I'm not going to write again. This is goodbye. Sarah." Nora folded the letter carefully and placed it back in its envelope. What had her grandmother done to her? She thought about the blank spaces in her memory. The way her childhood before the move was a fog, punctuated by flashes, the smell of lavender, the creak of stairs, the feeling of being watched. She always assumed that was normal. That everyone's early memories were fragmentary, unreliable. But her mother had been afraid. Afraid enough to run. Afraid enough to lie. And now Nora was back. She looked up at the ceiling, toward the bedroom where the notebooks waited. The sound had stopped, the page turning, if that's what it had been. The house was silent in that heavy way, the way a room goes silent when someone is holding their breath. She should leave. Call the lawyer, tell him to sell the house as is, take whatever she could get and disappear. She had enough money for gas. She could sleep in her car. She'd done it before. But she didn't move. Because there was something she needed to know. Something the notebooks could tell her. Nora climbed the stairs. The bedroom door was open. She'd closed it. She remembered closing it when she'd fled, pulling it shut behind her, hearing the latch click. But now it stood open, just a few inches, and through the gap she could see the gray light from the window and the towers of notebooks casting long shadows across the floor. She pushed the door open the rest of the way. Everything was as she'd left it. The boxes, the scattered pages, the hole in the wall. Nothing had moved. But there was a notebook on the bed that hadn't been there before. It sat in the center of the quilt, placed precisely, as if someone had laid it out for her to find. The cover was newer than the others, the cardboard still bright, the binding intact. Nora picked it up. The first page was dated 6 years ago. October 14th, 2019. Nora came today. Her breath stopped. She arrived at 3:45 p.m. She was driving a white car, older model, rust on the left fender. She parked in the driveway and sat for 8 minutes before getting out. She looked thinner than before. Tired. She stood on the porch for a long time, looking at the door. Nora turned the page. October 14th, 2019. 4:30 p.m. Nora walked through the house. She went to every room. She spent 11 minutes in my bedroom, looking at the notebooks. She didn't read them. She just touched the covers, one by one, like she was counting them. October 14th, 2019. 6 p.m. Nora sat in the kitchen and cried. I watched from the stairs. She didn't know I was there. She kept saying I'm sorry. I don't know who she was talking to. Nora's hands were trembling. She turned more pages. March 3rd, 2020. Nora came again. She brought a notebook of her own this time. She sat on the porch and wrote for 2 hours. I couldn't see what she was writing. When she left, she took the notebook with her. August 19th, 2020. Nora came. She walked directly to the wall in my bedroom and pulled out a handful of pages. She read them standing up, her lips moving. Then she put them back. She didn't come downstairs. She didn't say goodbye. January 7th, 2021. Nora came. She looked sick. She went to the hole in the wall and pressed her hand against the plaster beside it. She stood like that for 40 minutes. I could hear her whispering, but I couldn't make out the words. Page after page. Visit after visit. Dated entries spanning years, each one describing Nora arriving at the house, moving through the rooms, performing rituals she had no memory of. The last entry was dated 3 weeks before her grandmother died. September 2nd, 2023. Nora came. She brought a box of her own notebooks. 12 of them, filled with her handwriting. She put them in the wall with the others. She told me she was ready. I asked her what she was ready for. She said, to take over. When it's time. I told her I was proud of her. She told me she'd been feeding it for years. That she could feel it now, the way I feel it. That it knew her name. She smiled when she said that. But her eyes were wrong. Her eyes looked like mine. Nora dropped the notebook. It hit the floor and fell open to a page near the end, a page she hadn't read. She looked down at it without meaning to, and saw her grandmother's handwriting, shakier now, the letters uneven. It doesn't need me anymore. It has her. It's had her all along, I think. Since she was a child. Since before I made the deal. Maybe that's why I made the deal in the first place. Maybe it wanted her, and I was just the door. I'm so tired. I've been watching for so long. I think I'll stop now. The room was very cold. Nora looked at the hole in the wall. At the compressed mass of papers stuffed inside. And now, with the afternoon light hitting it just right, she could see something she'd missed before. Some of the pages weren't yellowed. Some of them were new. She reached in and pulled one out. Her own handwriting stared back at her. April 22nd, 2022. The mailman came at 11:15 a.m. He was wearing a blue jacket. He looked at the house for 9 seconds before driving away. Nora pulled out another page. And another. All of them in her handwriting. Hundreds of them. Years of observations she had no memory of making, stuffed into the walls of her grandmother's house, feeding the thing that lived in the dark spaces. She heard a sound behind her. Not footsteps. Not breathing. Just a shift in the silence, a displacement of air, as if something large had moved. Nora didn't turn around. She already knew, with a certainty that went deeper than memory, that there was nothing to see. That the thing in the walls didn't have a shape, not exactly. It was just a presence. A hunger. An attention so vast and patient it had been waiting here since before the house was built, since before her grandmother was born, since before any of them. And it knew her. It had always known her. She could feel it now, the way her grandmother had described. A pressure behind her eyes. A compulsion in her fingers. The desperate, aching need to write it all down, the dust on the windowsill, the angle of the light, the number of heartbeats between each breath. Nora closed her eyes. In the darkness behind her lids, she saw the thing. Not its shape, it didn't have a shape, but its attention. Its vast, patient, hungry attention fixed on her like an eye the size of the sky. And in that attention, she saw herself. 8 years old, writing in a notebook under the covers. 17, waking from dreams she couldn't remember with ink on her fingers. 23, driving for hours without knowing where she was going, finding herself parked outside a house she didn't recognize, a pen in her hand, a half-filled page in her lap. All the blank spaces in her memory weren't blank at all. They were full of watching, full of writing, full of feeding the thing that had claimed her before she was born. Nora opened her eyes. She picked up a pen from her grandmother's nightstand. She began to write. November 15th, 2023. 4:47 p.m. The light through the window is gray. There are 17 notebooks on the floor. The wallpaper is peeling in 3 places. My hand is. Nora stopped. The pen hovered over the page, trembling. She could feel the compulsion like a physical weight, pressing down on her skull, threading through her fingers, demanding. The thing in the walls was so close now. Not behind her, around her. In the air she breathed. In the space between her thoughts. Write, it said. Not in words. In hunger. Write what you see. Write what you hear. Write until there's nothing left of you but eyes and hands and the endless watching. Her grandmother had done it for 60 years. Had fed it, appeased it, given it everything. And in return, what? Safety? Protection? The family had been safe, yes. No accidents. No tragedies. Until her mother had run, had torn Nora away, had broken the chain. And then her mother had gotten sick. The cancer had come fast, the doctors said. Unusually aggressive. As if something that had been held back for years had finally been allowed to catch up. Nora understood now. The deal was real. The protection was real. And when her mother had run, when she tried to keep Nora from becoming this, she'd stepped outside the circle. She'd made herself visible to all the things her grandmother's watching had kept at bay. The pen touched the paper again. My hand is shaking. The house is quiet. I can hear. She stopped again. What could she hear? Nothing. That was the answer. The house was silent, perfectly silent, the way no house should be. No settling wood. No wind. No mice in the walls. Just the thing, pressed against the edges of the world, waiting. If she kept writing, it would be fed. It would be happy. It would keep her safe the way it had kept her grandmother safe, alone, forgotten, scribbling in the dark until her heart gave out. If she stopped. Nora didn't know what would happen if she stopped. She looked down at the notebook in her lap. At her handwriting, so similar to her grandmother's. At the words she'd written without choosing to write them. She thought about her mother. About the letters, the desperate attempt to save her, the years of silence that were really years of love. Her mother had known. had understood the price of freedom was danger, was vulnerability, was a life unprotected by ancient and hungry things. And she'd chosen it anyway. Let her forget, she'd written. Let her forget. But Nora hadn't forgotten. Not really. The thing had kept its hooks in her, had drawn her back again and again, had filled her blank spaces with watching and writing and the slow erosion of self. She'd been feeding it her whole life without knowing. The only question now was whether she would keep feeding it on purpose. Nora stood up. The pressure behind her eyes intensified. The compulsion screamed through her nerves, demanding she sit back down, pick up the pen, write until there's nothing left. She walked to the window. Outside, the yard was gray and overgrown. The rusted swing set stood at the edge of the property, chains creaking in a wind she couldn't hear. Beyond it, the road. Her car. The world. She could leave. She could walk out of this house and drive away and never come back. Sell it from a distance. Let the notebooks rot. Let the thing in the walls starve. But she knew, the way she knew her own name, the way she knew the feel of a pen in her hand, that leaving wouldn't save her. The thing didn't live in the house. The house was just where it pressed closest to the surface. It lived in the watching itself. In the act of observation. In every note she'd ever written, every detail she'd ever recorded, every moment she tried to pin the world down with words. It lived in her. It had always lived in her. The pen was still in her hand. She didn't remember picking it up again. November 15th, 2023, she thought. 4:52 p.m. The light is fading. The swing set is moving. There is no wind. She didn't write it down. Not yet. Nora stood at the window for a long time, watching the gray light die, feeling the thing coil and uncoil in the spaces behind her eyes. It was patient. It had been patient for longer than she could imagine. It could wait. But so could she. She thought about her mother, who had run and never stopped running, and who had died anyway. She thought about her grandmother, who had stayed and watched and written, and who had also died. There was no version of this story where Nora lived forever. No deal that didn't end in the dark. The only choice was what she did with the time she had. The pen felt heavy in her hand. The notebook lay open on the bed behind her. Nora turned away from the window. She looked at the room, the notebooks, the boxes, the hole in the wall stuffed with decades of watching. Her inheritance. Her grandmother's life's work. The thing's long, slow meal. She could burn it. She could carry every notebook outside and set them on fire and watch the pages curl and blacken. Maybe that would hurt it. Maybe that would set her free. Or maybe it would just make it angry. Nora picked up the notebook from the bed. She looked at the words she'd written, the start of an entry she hadn't chosen to begin. My hand is shaking. The house is quiet. I can hear. She pressed the pen to the page. For a long moment, she didn't move. The thing waited. The house waited. The whole gray world held its breath. Then Nora wrote a single word. She closed the notebook before she could see what it was. The house still stands at the end of that long dirt road, if you know where to look. The yard is overgrown. The porch sags. The windows are dark, but sometimes, if you drive past at the right time of day, you might see a shape behind the glass. Watching. The county records say the property was never sold. The owner is listed as N. Ashworth, though no one by that name has been seen in town for years. The mailman still delivers letters sometimes, bills, mostly, and the occasional piece of junk mail. They pile up on the porch until they don't. Someone takes them inside. Someone is still there. And if you stood very quietly on that sagging porch, if you pressed your ear to the door, you might hear something from deep within the house. Soft, rhythmic, like someone turning pages, or like someone putting them down.